You owe your sister a future. My parents dragged me to court over an $82,000 inheritance. Can you imagine sitting in a courtroom, staring at your own parents across the aisle as a judge declares them guilty of fraud, effectively sanctioning them for trying to destroy your life? That's exactly where I found myself, utterly stunned as the gavel fell, all because my sister felt entitled to everything I'd ever built. The air in that courtroom was thick, suffocating, a heavy mix of ancient wood and my own tense sweat. 3 rows ahead, my parents huddled with their lawyer, whispering frantically, their faces etched with a desperate anxiety that, frankly, mirrored my own, but for very different reasons. My sister, Meline, wasn't even there. Too humiliated, maybe? Or perhaps she just couldn't face the colossal mess she'd helped create. This wasn't just some petty family dispute. This was a venomous lawsuit alleging I had unlawfully taken family assets that rightfully belonged to her. Their complaint claimed I'd exploited my own grandmother, stolen business opportunities, and deliberately sabotaged Meline's success. They demanded an astonishing $820,000. Almost $1 million. It was so outlandish it felt like a bad movie plot. But this was my life, and it was horrifyingly real. The truth? I had received $82,000 from my grandmother, Eleanor. Yes, I'd invested it well, but my successful business was built on years of grueling effort. Their math? It somehow added up to me owing them the inheritance back, plus damages for Meline's lost earnings. As if her inability to launch a career was somehow my burden, my fault, my debt to repay. The sheer audacity of it all was breathtaking. Their claims included truly ludicrous specifics. They accused me of poisoning Grandma Eleanor's mind against them by visiting her alone in the hospital, preventing other relatives from seeing her. This was despite the hospital having open visiting hours, and my parents having visited exactly twice in 4 weeks. Then, they claimed I'd used secret family business information to gain an unfair advantage in my accounting profession. What secret information? My parents worked in pharmaceutical sales and dental practice management. Nothing, absolutely nothing, related to my clients or services. One accusation truly stung. They suggested my company's rapid growth meant I must have received additional, undisclosed income from Grandma Eleanor. Their logic: I was too young, too inexperienced to achieve this level of success legitimately. So I must have cheated. That hit hard. Not because it was true, but because it echoed a self-doubt I'd secretly battled for years. Maybe I didn't deserve it. Maybe I just got lucky. Then I'd remember the 19-hour days, the $68,000 in student loans I repaid through sheer discipline, the years of sacrifice. No, luck had nothing to do with it. This agonizing disaster began 8 years ago, when everything I'd painstakingly built became a target. So let me take you back a bit. My name is Ethan Walker. Growing up, my parents made their preferences glaringly obvious without ever saying a word. When Meline turned 14, she got the newly remodeled bedroom. Me, I got the basement, with a tiny window near the ceiling that barely let in any light. For her 17th birthday, a practically new car appeared in the driveway. I got a bicycle and a bus pass. When it was time for her college applications, they hired a private advisor. I filled out the FAFSA alone, hunched over a public library computer, feeling utterly invisible. Nobody ever sat me down and explained why things were the way they were. The inequality just existed, like gravity, like the weather. My father made a good living selling pharmaceuticals. My mother managed a dental office. They weren't rolling in cash, but they had enough to make different choices. They just chose not to for me. So, at 16, I started bussing tables at a chain restaurant on the highway. Hot, greasy, endless. My feet ached every night, but those paychecks were mine. That was more important than comfort. I saved obsessively, squirreling away 72% of every dollar. While Meline spent her summers at leadership camps and beach vacations, I worked extra shifts and learned how to meal prep for less than $3.50 a dish. College became my escape hatch. I applied to 26 institutions, focusing on those with good financial aid. When the acceptance letters rolled in, I got into a reputable public university with a half scholarship. The rest? Loans, work study, and keeping my restaurant job. My parents attended Meline's graduation celebration that spring, a catered garden event, complete with a DJ and personalized cupcakes. My mother sent me a card with $50 and a hurried, almost illegible note. Proud of you! The disparity hit me like a physical blow. University life was 19-hour days, classes from 8 to 3, then straight to the college dining hall where I worked until 9 p.m. Homework from midnight to 3 a.m. most nights. I ran on coffee and pure, unadulterated spite. Honestly, the spite kept me sharper than the caffeine. Every time my roommate mentioned her parents sending care packages or paying her credit card bills, that old rage would coil in my chest. I channeled it all into my accounting classes, my job performance, every single decision. Meline, meanwhile, attended a private college 3 states away. Tuition, $48,000 a year. My parents covered everything. Her apartment, meal plan, spending money. She joined a sorority, studied communications, and shared endless photos from formals and ski trips. I followed her life on social media, each post a painful reminder of a parallel reality where parental support actually existed. During my sophomore year, I started freelancing. Basic bookkeeping for small businesses, tax prep for individuals, anything that paid. I found clients through online forums and local business associations. The work was slow at first, maybe $600 a month, but I was meticulous, fast, and cheap compared to established firms. Word spread. After 3 years, I was earning $2,300 a month on top of my regular jobs. Student loans felt like chains around my future. Even with subsidies and my income, I was staring down $68,000 in debt upon graduation. I looked at repayment schedules, calculating how many years of minimum payments it would take. The number made me physically ill. So, I hatched a plan. Live like a pauper, throw everything at the principal, and finish this nightmare as quickly as humanly possible. My first post-graduation apartment was a studio in a rough neighborhood. $450 a month, utilities included. It had bugs and inconsistent heat, but I didn't care. I worked my accounting job from 6:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., then freelanced until midnight. Weekends were 13-hour days. I ate the same cheap meals, rice and beans, pasta with canned sauce, eggs and toast, peanut butter sandwiches. My clothes came from thrift stores. Entertainment was free podcasts and library books. Every spare penny went to those loans. I paid $3,400 a month when the minimum was $650. My coworkers thought I was insane. They'd invite me to happy hours or weekend trips, and I'd always decline. Eventually, they stopped asking. It was fine. I had a different priority. The freelance business kept growing. In my second year out of school, I formed an LLC. We started taking on larger clients, businesses with real budgets. I hired one part-time assistant, then another. My rates climbed as my reputation expanded. By year 3, the side business was generating more revenue than my regular job. I quit my accounting firm the same week I made my final student loan payment. 29 months. That's how long it took to pay off $68,000. The loan servicer's confirmation email arrived on a Tuesday morning. I sat in my dingy studio apartment, staring at the screen, hoping the accomplishment would feel bigger. Mostly, I just felt exhausted and ready for the next thing. By the way, if you're still with me after all of this, please hit that subscribe button. Trust me, the narrative only gets crazier from here, and more astonishing stories await you. The business now demanded my full attention. I moved to a better apartment, not extravagant, but clean and safe. For the first time in my adult life, I bought new furniture instead of used. I hired 3 more staff. Within 9 months, revenue hit 6 figures. Building that clientele meant constant hustling. I attended every networking event within a 60-mile radius, joined 3 business associations, and offered free financial literacy workshops at community centers. The grind never really ended. It just shifted from survival to growth mode. My calendar was a blur of client meetings, proposal presentations, and follow-up calls. Then, a single client meeting changed everything. Precision Tools, a manufacturing company, needed someone to sort through 6 years of disorganized documents. Their previous accountant had abruptly retired, leaving incomplete records and unexplained discrepancies. The owner, Frank Holloway, a gruff man in his 60s, interviewed me in his messy office, surrounded by metal parts and coffee-stained paperwork. "I've talked to 9 other firms," Frank said, reclining in his chair. "They all want to charge me at least $25,000 just to assess the damage. What makes you different?" "I'll do the assessment for free," I replied, my voice steady. "Give me 3 days with your records. If I can't figure out what's going on, you owe me nothing. If I can fix it, we can negotiate a fair fee based on the actual work required." Frank looked at me for a long minute. "You're either overconfident or foolish." "A touch of both, perhaps," I responded with a faint smile. He chuckled and shook my hand. That assessment took me 72 hours over one very long weekend. I uncovered the issues, mostly categorization errors and misallocations. Nothing illegal, but sloppy enough to have significant tax consequences. My proposal was $14,000 for a thorough cleanup and ongoing monthly services. Frank Holloway became not just a client, but a referral goldmine. Within 4 months, he introduced me to 7 other business owners. Each connection led to more opportunities. Word spread. I was thorough, reasonably priced, and genuinely cared about small business owners who couldn't afford the big firms. The hiring process gave me unexpected insights into leadership. Lauren Pierce, my first employee, was a recent graduate with excellent technical skills, but zero confidence. She'd second-guess every decision, ask permission for simple tasks, and constantly apologize for taking up my time. Her uncertainty reminded me of my younger self. "You know what you're doing," I told her after she apologized for the 3rd time that morning. "Stop asking permission to be competent. Just do the work and show me the results." She looked surprised, then grateful. Over the next few months, I watched her blossom into someone who trusted her own judgment. That was almost as satisfying as landing new clients. Building other people up while growing a firm led to a different kind of success, one that went beyond sales numbers. During this time, my parents called occasionally, but only briefly, to ask superficial questions about my career. They never inquired about my debts, offered assistance, or even acknowledged the chasm in how they treated us. According to my mother's cryptic updates, Meline had graduated, moved back home, and was considering her options. During one particularly unpleasant phone call, my father revealed they were planning a family trip to Florida. "Your sister really needs this break," he'd said. "She's been through a lot with the job search." I bit back the obvious comment about how I'd worked 3 jobs simultaneously without taking any family vacations. Instead, I just said, "That sounds nice. I hope you have beautiful weather." He continued, "We'd invite you, but I know you're too busy with work." The casual dismissal hurt, even though I had no desire to join them. It wasn't about wanting to go. It was about not even being considered. The unspoken assumption that I would always be too busy or too disconnected to be included. They built that distance over years of choices, then blamed me for maintaining it. Then, my grandmother got sick. Grandma Eleanor had always been different. She'd sneak me 20s when my parents weren't looking, take me for ice cream, and ask serious questions about school. During college, she sent care packages with practical items. Socks, stamps, grocery store gift cards. Nothing fancy, but it showed she paid attention. The cancer diagnosis came out of nowhere. Stage 4, spreading rapidly. Every day after work, I visited her in the hospital, sitting by her bed as the machines beat their repetitive rhythm. We talked about everything but her death, which seemed to be her preference. She'd ask about my business, insisted on seeing the website, and assured me she'd always known I'd figure things out. 1 month before she died, she asked me to bring her attorney to the hospital. They met privately for an hour. Mr. Richard Lawson, the lawyer, then handed me his business card and said Grandma Eleanor wanted me to call him after the funeral. I had no idea what it meant. The funeral was the first time I'd seen my entire family in over a year. Meline looked different, thinner, worried. She rarely made eye contact. My parents seemed older, grayer, more bent. We exchanged only basic greetings. The service was elegant and heartbreaking, just as Grandma Eleanor would have wanted. At the reception, held in a local community hall, I stood near the back, nursing a cup of terrible coffee. Relatives I barely knew expressed their sorrow and asked about my life. I kept my answers modest, not wanting to invite the obvious comparisons to Meline, who was exploring her options. My aunt, Susan Miller, confronted me near the dessert table. She was my mother's sister, the warmest and most sensitive member of the family. "You're doing well," she said, her voice soft. It wasn't a question. "Eleanor was so proud of you. She told me many times. She said you had more grit than anyone she'd ever known." Something caught in my throat. She'd never mentioned that to me. "She didn't want you to feel pressured by her expectations," Susan continued, "but she knew everything you were doing, the loans, the business. She knew your parents treated you and Meline differently." I looked across the room at my mother, who was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, receiving sympathy from neighbors. Did she ever say anything to them about it? Susan sighed. She stepped back when they got defensive, claiming they were just supporting each child based on their needs. Eleanor didn't push. Family peace was important to her, even if she disagreed with their choices. We stood in comfortable silence for a bit, watching the crowd slowly disperse. "Thanks for telling me," I finally said. "You deserve to know." 5 days later, Mr. Richard Lawson called me. His office was downtown in one of those old buildings with high ceilings and creaky wooden floors. He sat behind a large oak desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, and informed me that my grandmother had bequeathed me $82,000. The rest of her estate, in nearly equal proportions, went to my parents and aunt. I sat there, stunned, trying to absorb it. $82,000. It was the most money I'd ever had at once. More importantly, it was affirmation, validation from the one family member who saw my struggle and cared enough to help. "She wanted you to have options," Mr. Lawson explained. "Those were her words, not mine. She said you had earned the right to some breathing room." I put $35,000 down on a tiny house in a developing neighborhood. The mortgage was cheaper than rent for a comparable place. The remaining funds were invested directly into the company, covering an office lease and new equipment. Within 6 months, income had doubled again. My parents learned about the inheritance when I mentioned buying the house during a rare phone conversation. My mother's tone shifted instantly, becoming sharp and inquisitive. "How much did Grandma Eleanor leave you? Why didn't you tell us? What are you going to do with all that money?" I kept my answers generic, sensing something off about her line of questioning. The conversation ended awkwardly. 3 days later, Meline called. We hadn't spoken personally in almost a year. "Mom told me about Grandma's money," she said, no preamble. "That's not fair, Ethan. She should have divided it equally among us." "She made her own decisions about her money," I replied calmly, even as my blood began to boil. "You always had to be special, didn't you? Always had to make the rest of us look bad." The accusation was so ludicrous, I almost laughed. "I made you look bad, Meline? I worked through college while you partied on your parents' dime. I paid off $68,000 in loans while you were living at home. I started my own business while you were between retail jobs. I didn't make you look like anything. Your choices did that. Screw you, Ethan. You're so high and mighty now that you have money, but you've forgotten where you came from. Actually, I shot back. I remember exactly where I came from. That's why I fought so hard to get somewhere else. I hung up before she could respond. Something felt terribly wrong about the entire exchange, as if I was being set up. The timing of my mother's questions and Meline's call suggested a deliberate strategy. They were constructing a narrative, but I couldn't yet see its full, horrifying shape. A week later, my father called. He used his reasonable voice, the one he employed when trying to appear fair-minded. "Ethan, your mother told me about the inheritance situation. I think there's been some misunderstanding." "What misunderstanding would that be?" My guard was fully up. "Well, Grandma Eleanor was quite old when she made those choices. Sometimes older people are influenced without realizing it. We're not saying you did anything wrong on purpose." "Stop right there," I said, my voice tight. Grandma Eleanor was fully competent. She knew exactly what she was doing. And if you're implying I manipulated her, you can take that accusation and shove it. "Nobody's accusing anyone," he said quickly, his tone becoming less reasonable. "We're just concerned about fairness. Meline is struggling financially, and it feels like family should help each other." "Then you help her." Silence. "Oh, wait. Use the money Grandma Eleanor left you. You've already spent it, haven't you? On what exactly?" I'd hit a nerve. "That is our business," he finally stated, his voice now cold and sharp. "And my inheritance is mine. We're done with this conversation." The next few months saw explosive growth for my company. I landed 4 major clients, all mid-sized businesses needing comprehensive financial management. I hired 2 more accountants and moved to a larger office. My team was achieving goals I could only have dreamed of 3 years ago. Then Meline's life imploded. Since graduation, she'd bounced between retail and administrative jobs, never staying more than 9 months. According to family gossip filtered through my aunt, she'd also gotten deeply involved in a multi-level marketing scheme, one of those companies promising wealth through recruitment. She'd persuaded my parents to invest $22,000 in her venture. The whole thing predictably collapsed. The company faced lawsuits, its structure exposed as predatory, and everyone suffered massive financial losses. Meline had apparently gone deep into debt to maintain the lifestyle promoted by the scheme, buying inventory and attending conferences. The financial fallout was severe. My mom called me on a Saturday morning. "Your sister needs help," she stated without a greeting. "We need you to loan her some money so she can get back on her feet." "How much are we talking about?" My heart sank. $55,000. That would pay off her debts and give her a cushion for a fresh start. I nearly laughed. $55,000, requested as if it were a casual favor. I'm not doing that. "Ethan, she's family. She made mistakes, but she deserves another chance. She's had nothing but chances. I'm not going to fund her poor decisions." My mother's voice turned cold, cutting. "We gave her the investment money because we believed in her. You received Grandma Eleanor's inheritance due to manipulation. The least you could do is help your sister right now." Manipulation. My hands trembled with rage. I went to see Grandma Eleanor in the hospital. I spent time with her. That's not manipulation. That's caring for someone. You knew she had money. You positioned yourself to benefit. I hung up. My hands were shaking with rage, but also something else. Fear, perhaps. The claim was ludicrous, but the fact that she made it at all told me something worse was coming. For weeks later, I received a letter from an attorney's office I didn't recognize. A legal complaint. Pages of dense, thick wording. My parents and Meline were suing me for unjust enrichment, elder abuse, and malicious interference with family relations. They alleged I had isolated my grandmother, poisoned her against them, and improperly collected inherited funds that should have been distributed evenly. I immediately called my attorney, Daniel Cross, who had helped me with commercial contracts before. He read the complaint over the phone, occasionally chuckling doubtfully. This is weak, Ethan. Ultimately very weak. They're making accusations without evidence. Your grandmother had the legal right to disperse her assets however she wished. They have nothing unless they can prove you pressured her, or she wasn't mentally competent. Can they prove either of those? I asked, my voice barely audible. Did I coerce her? Was she mentally unfit? No and no, I confirmed. She was sharp until the end. We just talked. I paid her a visit. Then we're good, Daniel said with a sigh. We'll file a response. We'll probably get this dismissed. It's a nuisance suit, to be honest. They're upset and looking for someone to blame. Despite Daniel's assurance, a constant, gnawing fear settled in my stomach. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., my thoughts racing with worst-case scenarios. What if the judge believed their story? What if my success was twisted into evidence of wrongdoing? What if the legal fees bankrupted the business I'd fought so hard to build? The first few weeks after receiving the complaint were unbearable. I'd be in client meetings, trying to focus on financial projections, while my mind spiraled into legal nightmares. Lauren Pierce noticed my preoccupation during a team meeting where I completely lost my train of thought. Are you okay, boss? She asked after everyone else had left. I considered deflecting, maintaining professional boundaries, but the stress was becoming too much. Pretending wouldn't help. Family lawsuit, I admitted with a wry smile. They claim I manipulated my grandmother. Lauren's eyes widened. That's absurd. What are you going to do? Fight it. Win it. Keep working through it. If you need anything, she said, her voice firm, extra hours, picking up additional clients, just ask. We have your back. Her loyalty meant more than she probably understood. I had built a team that truly functioned as a team, something my original family had never achieved. These people knew very little about me compared to my relatives, yet they offered more genuine support than I had experienced in 30 years of family membership. The lawsuit dragged on for months. My parents' attorney, a smarmy man named Harold Whitman, filed motion after motion, each one more ridiculous than the last. They wanted my company records, claiming I'd used inherited funds to unjustly compete with Meline's non-existent business enterprise. They demanded 7 years of my bank statements. They asked for depositions from my staff, my clients, even my landlord. Daniel Cross fought everything, but it was exhausting and costly. Legal fees mounted. I had to spend hours writing responses, gathering documentation, recalling every interaction with my grandmother. The tension impacted my sleep, my work, my health. I lost 18 pounds without trying. One deposition stood out as particularly bizarre. Whitman questioned me for 7 hours straight, circling the same issues repeatedly, fishing for inconsistencies that didn't exist. He'd ask about a hospital visit from 4 years ago, demanding specific times and conversation details. When I couldn't recall if I arrived at 2:20 or 2:40 on a random Tuesday afternoon, he'd act as if I'd lied. So, you admit your time frame is unreliable. He'd sneer, as if missing a precise arrival time revealed a massive conspiracy. Daniel Cross would object. We'd go off the record, and then return to more circular questions. At hour 4, I wanted to scream. By hour 7, I felt completely hollowed out. This was my family doing this. People who had known me my entire life, who had watched me grow up, who knew I was incapable of the manipulation they claimed. Yet here we were, in a windowless conference room, playing out their desperate fantasy. The betrayal was crushing. My parents, the people who gave birth to me, were actively trying to ruin what I had built through nothing but hard work and dedication. They had prioritized Meline's comfort over basic fairness my entire upbringing, and now they sought to punish me for achieving despite their neglect. The discovery phase revealed the full extent of their financial mess. Meline was $78,000 in debt and teetering on bankruptcy. My parents had refinanced their home twice, the second time to pay for her MLM losses. They were behind on payments and facing foreclosure. The lawsuit wasn't about justice or fairness. It was a desperate money grab, pure and simple. During discovery, Daniel Cross found something even more damning. Emails exchanged between my mother and Meline, about a week after my grandmother died, discussing how to handle the inheritance problem. They'd been planning this from the very beginning, looking for ways to contest the will or blame me for their exclusion. Daniel showed me the email chain. "We can use this," he said. "This proves they knew the bequest was legitimate but chose to manufacture a story anyway. It demolishes their credibility." The emails were damning in their casual cruelty. My mother had written, "If we can show that Ethan isolated Eleanor from the family, we may have grounds for undue influence. We should document every instance of him monopolizing her time." Meline had responded, "What about the business? Can we claim he used her money to get an unfair advantage? That would explain why he's doing better than me." Reading my own family schematics to destroy my reputation felt surreal. These were people who had known me since infancy, who had witnessed my struggles and successes, and knew the truth about my connection with Grandma Eleanor. Yet, they were willing to concoct an entirely bogus narrative because Meline's poor choices had unfavorable consequences. Daniel Cross meticulously prepared our defense, building a timeline that established my long-standing, loving relationship with Grandma Eleanor. He gathered evidence of Meline's limited contact with her, my parents' sporadic visits, and Grandma Eleanor's clear mental competence in both legal and medical matters. Our argument wasn't just good, it was overwhelming. But the emotional toll continued to mount. I lost sleep, weight, patience. Minor annoyances at work caused enormous frustration. I snapped at a vendor over a small billing issue, something I usually handled with calm professionalism. The tension was seeping into everything, infecting aspects of my life completely unrelated to the lawsuit. One evening, about 4 months before trial, I sat in my home office, staring at legal paperwork until the words blurred. My phone rang. It was Aunt Susan Miller. "I heard about the lawsuit," she said without preamble. "Your mother mentioned it, but she gave a totally different version than I believe is accurate. They claim I cheated Grandma Eleanor out of inheritance, money meant for Meline." Susan was quiet for a long time. "That is despicable," she finally said. "Eleanor was very clear about her wishes. She explained plainly why she was leaving you that money. Would you be willing to testify to that?" "Absolutely. Whatever you need." Having Susan's backing was an unexpected comfort. She represented continuity with the positive aspects of my family heritage, proof that not everyone had abandoned their moral compass. Daniel Cross immediately put her on our witness list. The trial date arrived 16 months after the initial complaint. I wore a conservative suit and sat beside Daniel Cross as the courtroom filled. My parents and Meline sat across the aisle with Harold Whitman. We didn't acknowledge each other. The hearings were technical and, as is typical of legal battles, mostly boring. Harold Whitman called my mother as his first witness. She testified about how close Meline and Grandma Eleanor had supposedly been, how I'd unexpectedly started visiting the hospital, and how rare it was for Grandma to leave me such a significant sum. Daniel Cross's cross-examination was surgical. He produced hospital visitation logs showing I had been there every single day, while Meline had visited only twice. He had phone records, proving I had called Grandma regularly for many years. Mr. Richard Lawson testified regarding Grandma Eleanor's clear mental state and her stated preferences. My mother faltered under questioning, contradicting her previous statements and admitting she didn't know much about my relationship with Grandma. She seemed to shrink on the witness stand. Meline's testimony, desperate and cruel, only made matters worse for their case. She admitted under oath that she had never had a close relationship with Grandma Eleanor, that she was too busy to visit during her illness, and that she felt entitled to the money because she was struggling financially. "So, you believe your grandmother should have prioritized your debt over her own intentions for her estate?" Daniel Cross inquired, his voice calm yet powerful. "That's not what I said," she mumbled. "But you're suing your brother because your grandmother chose to help him over you, correct? And you claim he manipulated her. How exactly did he manipulate her?" Meline had no answer. She stumbled through a series of weak claims, none supported by evidence. Harold Whitman tried to rehabilitate her testimony during redirect, but the damage was already done. I testified on my own behalf, discussing my relationship with Grandma Eleanor, my work history, debt repayment, and everything. Daniel Cross made it clear that I hadn't asked for anything, that Grandma Eleanor had made her own decision, and that I'd been as surprised as anyone. The judge, an elderly woman named Helen Roth, listened to everything with a bland expression. When the testimony concluded, she took a 20-minute break before delivering her verdict from the bench, rather than taking additional time, ending with a dramatic resolution. "I've heard enough," Judge Roth said, her voice crisp and resonant. "The plaintiff's argument is based entirely on supposition and ill feelings. There is no evidence of manipulation, compulsion, or mental incapacity. Mrs. Eleanor Walker had every legal right to distribute her inheritance as she saw fit. The defendant's professional achievement has no bearing on whether he deserves inherited money. I am dismissing this case with prejudice, which means it cannot be refiled." She paused, looking squarely at my parents and Meline. "Furthermore, this case was frivolous and filed in poor faith. I have sanctioned the plaintiffs and their attorney. They will pay the defendant's legal fees, which I understand are approximately $52,000. In addition, I am referring Mr. Whitman to the State Bar for a review of his actions in pursuing this bogus claim." The courtroom was utterly silent. My parents were shocked, their faces pale. Meline was openly crying. Harold Whitman was frantically shuffling papers, his face flushed red. Daniel Cross leaned over and murmured, "That's the best possible outcome." She buried them. We remained standing as Judge Roth stepped down from the bench. I felt lighter than I had in almost a year, as if something toxic had been surgically removed from my system. The victory wasn't just legal. It was a profound validation of every decision I'd made, every hardship I'd faced. My father approached us while we were gathering our things. He looked older than I remembered, defeated and small. "Ethan, we need to talk," he said, his voice hollow. "No, we do not," I spoke, my voice firm and unyielding. "You made your choice. You are going to pay my legal fees as directed, and then we will be done." "You can't mean that. We're family. You sued me. You accused me of elder abuse. You tried to destroy my business and my reputation because you couldn't believe that Grandma Eleanor saw who I truly was. That is not family. That is something else entirely." My mother joined him, her face contorted with rage, even in defeat. "Aren't you just so proud of yourself? So superior?" "I'm done being your scapegoat," I said, meeting her gaze firmly. "I'm done apologizing for succeeding. You want to know what I'm proud of? I'm proud I did it alone. I'm proud I didn't need you." I walked out with Daniel Cross, leaving them standing there, bewildered and broken. The courthouse stairs were bustling with people coming and going, everyday life continuing around my personal drama. The afternoon sun was bright, almost blinding after the dim courtroom. "What now?" Daniel Cross asked. "Now," I said, a deep breath filling my lungs, "I go back to work. I keep building what I started." The legal bills arrived in my account 7 weeks later, garnished from my parents' salaries and Meline's meager income. I didn't feel victorious, seeing the money. Mostly I felt tired and melancholy, sad at what might have been. My business continued to flourish. I hired more employees, opened a second office, expanded our services. My story gained a quiet recognition in local business circles. The boy who built something from nothing while fighting a family lawsuit. It drew unexpected clientele, people who respected that resilience. My parents lost their house 9 months after the trial. The financial strain from legal bills, combined with their existing troubles, created an impossible situation. They moved into a rental property in a cheaper area. I learned this through my aunt, who still maintained contact with me despite the family friction. "Your mother asks about you," Aunt Susan observed during one of our monthly coffee meetings. "She won't admit she was wrong, but she's hurt that you've cut them off." She sued me for almost $1 million based on lies. What response did she expect? "She's your mother, Ethan. People make mistakes." This wasn't a mistake. This was a premeditated strike because they couldn't abide watching me win without their support. There's a difference. Meline declared bankruptcy and moved back in with my parents. According to Susan, she was working in a call center and barely speaking to anyone. The golden child treatment had left her fundamentally unsuited for adult life. And now she was paying the consequences. I didn't relish their suffering. That's not who I wanted to be. But I also didn't feel responsible for fixing problems they'd created through their own decisions. They taught me early that life wasn't fair, that some people get support and others don't. I'd learned that lesson thoroughly. 3 years after the trial, the business exceeded $1.2 million in annual revenue. We celebrated with a team dinner at a fancy restaurant, everyone laughing and sharing stories. These were my people now, the ones who toiled with me, who believed in what we were building. Family wasn't just biology. Sometimes it was choice, effort, and mutual respect. I bought a bigger house in a nicer neighborhood. Nothing extravagant, but comfortable and truly mine. The mortgage payment was easy, the kind of financial ease that would have seemed unthinkable a decade before. I furnished it gradually, buying things I genuinely liked rather than whatever was cheapest. Dating happened sometimes, but work remained my primary focus. I met someone named Emily Carter, a teacher with a sharp sense of humor and no patience for drama. We took things slow, building something authentic without rushing. She knew my history, the family stuff, and respected how I'd handled it. "You're not cold," she observed once, after I'd worried aloud about being too removed from my parents. "You're just done accepting unacceptable treatment. That's healthy, not cruel." 8 years after the trial, my business employed 47 people across 4 offices. We branched into financial advising and wealth management, serving hundreds of clients around the region. The triumph was consistent now, established rather than frenetic. I saw my mother once during that period, a chance encounter at a supermarket. She looked at me across the vegetable aisle, and for a second, something passed between us. Not reconciliation, precisely, but maybe recognition. She nodded slightly. I nodded back. Then we continued shopping independently. That felt about right. Acknowledgement without reconciliation. Respect for common history without pretending the damage hadn't occurred. Some breaks don't heal. Forcing them just creates more misery. Meline wrote me a note on my 32nd birthday. Short, handwritten, no return address. She apologized for the lawsuit, admitting she'd been envious and entitled. Said she was working on being a better person. She didn't ask for forgiveness or money or contact. She just wanted me to know she understood now what she'd done. I appreciated the letter without feeling compelled to react. Her evolution was necessary, but it didn't erase the past. Maybe eventually we'd talk. Maybe not. Either outcome was acceptable. The business continued thriving. I started mentoring young individuals from challenging situations. Kids who reminded me of my younger self. I helped them navigate college applications, analyze financial aid offers, understand debt payments. I explained what I'd learned about building something from nothing. One boy, 18 years old, named Lucas Bennett, asked me during a mentorship session why I bothered helping strangers when my own family had treated me so terribly. "Because someone helped me when they didn't have to," I said, thinking about Grandma Eleanor. "And because I know what it's like to work twice as hard for half the recognition. If I can make that easier for someone else, why wouldn't I?" That became the actual victory, honestly. Not the lawsuit dismissal, or the business success, or the financial security. The real accomplishment was becoming someone who used power differently than it had been used against me. breaking cycles rather than perpetuating them. My folks might never grasp that. Meline might always harbor bitterness despite her apologies, but their understanding wasn't required for my tranquility. I had built a life based on labor, ethics, and a refusal to accept unfair treatment. The fact that those ideals had led to success wasn't manipulation or fraud. It was justice, the kind that genuinely exists when you stop waiting for others to supply it. The house I owned, the business I'd built, the team I'd recruited, the respect I'd earned. None of it came from my parents' support or my grandmother's fortune. Those things helped, yes, but the foundation was laid years earlier in a basement bedroom with a tiny window by a kid who decided that being overlooked meant he had the freedom to define success on his own terms. That boy had grown into someone capable of standing before a courtroom and defending what he built. Someone who could walk away from toxic family dynamics without guilt. Someone who could build something far better than what he'd been given. And honestly, that was worth more than any inheritance could ever be. This whole journey was wild, and it taught me so much about what family really means. What would you have done in my place, especially when faced with that kind of betrayal from the people who raised you? Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.